I'll never forget the night I ventured into the forgotten Asylum, a decaying facility on the outskirts of town. My friends and I had always been intrigued by the eerie stories that swirled around it, tales of forgotten patients, ghostly apparitions, and doctors who were rumored to have gone mad themselves. I had been to several abandoned places before, but something about this place felt different. Maybe it was the unsettling silence or the overgrown ivy creeping through shattered windows, but I couldn't resist the temptation to explore. It was a Friday night when we decided to go. We were a group of 4, me, Jason, Laura, and Mike. Jason, the most adventurous of us all, was eager to lead the way. He'd been to abandoned hospitals and prisons before, always finding a way to sneak inside, document it, and then share it on his YouTube channel. But this time, the stakes were higher. This was the old Ravenwood Asylum, a place shrouded in mystery and legend. As we approached the gates, the iron bars were rusted, barely holding the entrance together. The building stood like a forgotten titan, looming in the distance, its windows like hollow eyes staring back at us. We could see a thin line of fog creeping around the base of the structure, as if the earth itself was trying to reject the place. Jason kicked open the rusted gates with a satisfying screech, and we slipped through, trying to keep quiet. The air was cold and damp, filled with the scent of mold and decay. We walked carefully, the ground uneven beneath our feet as we made our way to the back of the building. A broken window caught Jason's eye, and with a nod from the rest of us, he hoisted himself inside. The inside of the asylum was worse than I could have ever imagined. The air was thick with dust, and old medical equipment lay scattered in rooms that had once been filled with the sounds of patients' cries and doctors' commands. Everything was coated in grime, and the walls, stained with age, seemed to whisper secrets. We didn't know what we were expecting, but it certainly wasn't the overwhelming sense of dread that settled over us. As we moved deeper into the asylum, the atmosphere grew colder, and the silence grew more oppressive. Our flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the cracked walls. Jason led the way, snapping pictures for his channel, but I noticed Laura and Mike were growing more anxious by the second. I didn't blame them. There was something off about this place. It wasn't just the decay, it was the feeling that we weren't alone. Suddenly, we heard something. A loud thud, followed by dragging footsteps that seemed to come from the hallway behind us. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. "It's just the wind," Jason said, trying to stay calm, but his voice betrayed him. We continued walking, but the noise followed us, growing louder with every step. We turned a corner, and the flashlight beam landed on a room at the end of the hall. The door was cracked open, but no one had dared to step inside. The dragging sound stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, we heard it again, a faint whisper, like a distant voice carried by the wind. "I can't take this," Mike muttered, his voice trembling. "We need to leave. Now." But it was too late. The door to the room suddenly slammed open, and we were thrust into complete darkness. Jason cursed under his breath, his flashlight flickering once again. We tried to turn and run, but the hallway had changed. It was longer, the walls seeming to stretch out further than we remembered. And then the whispering started again, louder this time. It wasn't the wind. There was something, or someone, here with us. I felt a cold hand brush against my arm. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just darkness. The coldness in the air intensified, like it was pressing against my skin, suffocating me. Jason cursed, dropping his camera, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. We had to get out. But every path we took led us deeper into the building. The hallways twisted and turned in impossible ways, and each room seemed to bring us to more nightmares. There were paintings on the walls that seemed to move when you weren't looking, strange symbols carved into the floor that made no sense. And then, we came across a room that I'll never forget. It was an operating room. The equipment was all old, rusted, broken, some covered in a layer of what looked like dried blood. But it wasn't the room that terrified me. It was the bodies, or rather, the outlines of bodies. On the floor, the walls, and the ceiling, ghostly silhouettes, as if the souls of the patients had been trapped here, preserved in some grotesque form, haunting the room for eternity. I could hear faint whispers in the air again, but this time it was clear. "Help me." I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to close in on me, and before I knew it, I was on the floor, gasping for air, the darkness swirling around me. Jason and the others were panicking, but I couldn't move. I could only hear the whispers, growing louder, until it felt like they were inside my head, filling every inch of my mind. Finally, I managed to stand up, trembling, and I reached out to grab Jason's arm. "We need to leave. Now." I was barely able to speak. We ran. We didn't care where we were going anymore. We just needed to get out. Somehow, we made it to the entrance, our legs weak, our hearts still pounding in our chests. We stumbled out into the night, gasping for air, but the madness didn't end there. When we checked our phones, everything was normal at first. But then, Jason looked at his camera footage. The last thing recorded was the outline of a figure standing in the corner of the operating room, watching us leave.